The SME sector has been lauded as a driver of Kenya's economic growth, and for the first time in almost 20 years, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics has released data revealing the size of this sector. CNBC Africa now brings you the highlights of that report.
The Kenyan economy is home to 7.41 million micro, small and medium enterprises spread across the formal and informal sectors. Of these, only 1.56 million are licensed, and the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics reports that the unlicensed ones mostly operate at household levels.
We have sampled 50,000 farms or establishments, and also we have interviewed 14,000 households. And we have information on the licensed SMEs and also the unlicensed. The unlicensed one are mainly from the households. So we've had their characteristics, their areas of operation, how much is required for them to start up their businesses, for example, and what are the constraints, what are the challenges the SME are facing in this country. And also the study has come up with some very key recommendations, but eventually we are also going to do some in-depth analytical work so that we can enrich the discussion in this very vibrant sector of the economy, which employs a lot of people.
What I was a bit frustrated with as a development economist is that there wasn't very clear delineation between formal and informal. They had the licensed and unlicensed and did some analysis using those parameters. But when you look at the informal sector, which the Bureau of Statistics in Kenya actually reports on, they give us one figure a year on employment. I didn't see any correlations between what they were doing here and trying to build the body of knowledge on the informal sector. Also, another struggle I had with the data was that sometimes we'll do the licensed versus unlicensed in terms of the definition fields, but other times we'll do micro, small, medium. So within the micro, small, medium, we don't know of which portion is licensed versus unlicensed. I think they could have, if they were going to put in all that effort, I think they could have gotten a lot more detail in terms of how they're approaching the creation of that content.
The report also ranks businesses in the SME sector using two main parameters. These are the number of employees and the amount of capital required to open and run the business. In terms of employment, micro enterprises have less than 10 employees, while small enterprises employ between 10 to 49 people. Medium-sized enterprises were found to have 50 to 99 people working in them. Cumulatively, these businesses provide at least 14.9 million jobs to the economy and account for 28.5% of GDP.
From those, we noted that wholesale and retail trade, repair of motor vehicles and motorcycles accounted for more than half of the total persons working in the sector. That is, from the 14.9 million, 8 million were engaged in the wholesale and retail trade, repair of motor vehicles and motorcycles. Manufacturing accounted for 11.8%, while accommodation and food services accounted for 11.1% respectively. So we note that 14 million are engaged in the sector. These are the jobs. They might not be necessarily the people, because one person might be having like 3 of this establishment, but it is a very significant number.
On academic qualifications of the business owners, most business owners have only accomplished primary and secondary education, while less than 10% have undergraduate and postgraduate qualifications.
This is a sector that can create jobs for our youth people, young people who are coming up from the university, for example. And we went even to the extent of looking at the employees in these sectors, their level of education. And we noted that less than 10% of graduates are engaged, for example, in this sector. And there are a lot of opportunities that are available for these young graduates where they can venture in the sector. There are a lot of funds that have been established by government where they can use so that they can start small, medium-scale farms, for example. So it can create a lot of employment.
Access to funding remains a perennial challenge, as 62% of SMEs in Kenya see no need to borrow from banks, while 12.3% of them find the loans too expensive. Some of the top reasons why SMEs take loans include boosting working capital, refurbishing business, and purchasing inventory.
What we lack is accessibility and inclusivity in terms of assessing the finances. It is not the money that is not there. In fact, before the amendment bill, the financial amendment, banking amendment bill was done, I remember the banking fraternity, my friends, if you're here, with due respect, you actually dangled a very powerful carrot. We have 30 billion for the MSC sector. Do you remember? Does it mean we've not been borrowing from them? Why is it that that time there was 30 billion for us to start rushing, to start claiming for that money? Incidentally, after the president assented and all the banks agreed, the true revelation which we are getting from the banks is that they're lending more money. We, the MSCs, are gaining advantage. It is an opportunity for us. So all what he's saying is the opportunities are there. It is the framework that harnesses that opportunity that needs to be addressed.
Banks are making their money without this segment. I think it's not that's a very old story in terms of the issues that MSMEs have with regards to accessing financing, particularly if you're not formal. If you're in the informal sector, you don't have books, and that's part of the story that I've been saying, is that in order to build these businesses, we need to help them have accounting records, business management strategies, and all these things, so that they have a body of knowledge that they can then use to bring onto the table when they're negotiating for that access to finance. I don't think that this report will change any sort of lending patterns. I think, if anything, with the capping of the interest rates, SMEs are going to find it even harder to qualify for financing, and that's why I think it's time for alternative financing models, be it SACCOs, be it impact investors, be it venture capital, be it private equity.
On the back of rising government expenditure, Kenya's Treasury has proposed policies to make taxation of the SME sector more efficient by closing in on informal businesses. However, a section of economists believes that the harsh tax regime could lead to the death of small enterprises altogether.
Government has the wrong approach. Government is viewing informal or unlicensed, however they want to describe it, as mischievous tax evaders. My work that I do with the informal economy is very simple in that it says there are lots of micro businesses creating micro profits, right? I don't think the Kenya Revenue Authority has the muscle to get tax from all these micro businesses. I was talking to a Juakali association in Kamkunji, and they have 4,000, them alone have 4,000 micro firms, not members, micro firms that they're responsible for. So while government is giving us this rhetoric around, oh, we need to make them tax compliant, number one, I think that's the wrong approach. I think where these informal firms are is so low and so unproductive and so low levels, such low levels of profit, that even the effort government would put into getting those profits, I don't think would justify the amount of money they'd get out of those firms to begin with.
Perhaps one of the biggest impediments to the growth of the SME sector in Kenya is the high rates of business failure. Statistics reveal that 46% of businesses close within the first year of operation, 15% after 2 years, 10% after 3 years, 5% after 4 years, and 4% after 5 years. Only 5% of the businesses make it to their 15th anniversary.
In the first 2 years, there is a very high likelihood of these kind of businesses winding up and closing. So again, it's the period, the 1-2 years where a lot of capacity is required so that they do not close at that particular period in time. Then after they close, how do they dispose of their stocks? A big proportion disposed their stock by liquidation, that is at 31%. Others form of disposal was also giving up or giving the same stock to the family or friends at 30%. So we have very significant findings about the how the stock is disposed after the businesses have closed.